Kia ora koutou. Good morning. Welcome to our Infrastructure Committee meeting of the 2nd of September. I'd now just like to cover some housekeeping points. First, to note that this meeting has been recorded and it will be on the council website. The health and safety requirements of the Convention and Function Centre. There's toilets just through in the lobby, including disability provision. Exit through the main doors in an orderly fashion in the case of an emergency. It's a smoke-free venue. There is a first aid kit in the main office, a defibrillator on the ground floor, and that's the meeting area in an emergency is out on the grass area outside on Main Street. Now I'd like to call for apologies. I have Councillor Beattie as an apology, the Mayor for lateness, and just wanted to also acknowledge that we have some councillors online. Councillor Butt, Hancock are online. So welcome via the Teams app. I was going to say Zoom. Any other apologies?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just for clarity, I think Councillor Beattie and the Mayor are both on council. Their apologies for council business.
Thank you for that extra explanation. I'm happy to move the apologies. Seconded. Thank you. Councillor Barrett. All those in favour say, oh, let's vote. Invite you to vote. And we'll bring the vote up and then I'll ask. Actually, Councillor Butt, are you okay?
Yes, good.
Councillor Hancock?
Yes.
It's passed unanimously. Thank you. Notifications of additional items, I have none. Moves us on to declarations of interest. Are there any? Item 4 is public comments, which there is none. So therefore, it's with pleasure that I invite representatives from PowerCo to the table. Oliver Vincent, who's the Corporate Affairs Manager, will be joined with Alex Spears, who's the Development Planning Manager, and assisting with any questions, we also have Nigel Burst, who's the Project Manager for Manawatu Wairapa, and Shirley McGrath, who is the Regional Accounts Manager. And they'll be happy to assist with questions if needed. So welcome Oliver, and welcome Alex. The floor is yours. Thank you. Sorry, just with that slight technical difficulty, we just have to turn the microphone on. Okay. Right.
Hello.
Thank you, Chris. That's it. He's a pre-act.
How's that? Is that better?
We'll get the volume up. Yeah, it's certainly on. Yep.
Yep, good.
Yes, if maybe bring it closer, that's right.
Okay, I think we're off. So good morning, Tēnā koutou katoa. We'd like to acknowledge the Chair, Councillor Nelson, the other councillors and the staff for attending today's meeting. We've valued this opportunity to come and speak to the council and the staff here around the work we've been doing and to provide you some assurances around the alignment of our planning with the growth plans of the council. So today we'll just go through a number of short slides and go into some questions to allow you to understand our work in the future and the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years around Palmerston North and the city. So what are we here? We a quick recap on last time we were here. We were here, must have been around this time last year, where we came to talk to the council about our plans, and also directly to the staff around how we can ensure we work effectively and efficiently together. A quick update on what work we've done over the last year or so, and also looking at the long-term plan alignment with the PNCC's long-term vision. So just to briefly cover this off, this just gives a quick idea and a feel for the size and scope of the work that we're doing over this last year. So these figures are for the last year, and up there you can see that this is across our entire network in the North Island, the PowerCo's footprint. That kind of poles, we put 12% more poles in over the last 12 months, 34% more conductor, and cut 44% more tree sites. So we're really working hard out in our communities to ensure that we're delivering work and for the safety resilience of the network and the growth that areas are experiencing. At the same time, we've also managed to kind of mitigate the impact of our work on our communities, and that's in terms of the number and the frequency of outages that our customers are experiencing. We've lowered those, and we've kept the lights on 99.95% of the time, all while reducing our complaints. So we think it's been a really successful year, and a big portion of that work that we've been doing has been in the Palmerston North and the surrounding area. Specifically to Palmerston North City, you'll see that we have been quite visible, especially around the CBD and the Ferguson Street areas. Over the last year or two, we've been doing some major projects to upgrade the Ferguson Street substation, and also lay additional cables across the city, joining key assets that help with the resilience and the growth of the network. This is key work to ensure that we can actually support the growth areas in Palmerston North City, and the resilience with it being underground from storms. This work obviously causes disruptions, whether it's digging up road reserves. It requires a lot of support from councils and other agencies, but it's been we're kind of meeting our targets in terms of when this work occurs, and we're very conscious that there's other major projects and works going on alongside us, and we're working hard with key stakeholders to try and ensure that we're aligned with the timing of their work. And so you'll see at the bottom there some of the other projects that both PowerCo and PNCC are involved in are with the likes of Ministry of Defence, Kiwi Rail, and the Provincial Growth Fund. So we do have a strong eye on these, as well as our core day-to-day business. So we've also been looking closely at all of our regions in our plans. We believe we fully understand the PNCC's growth and vision for the city. We look carefully at and work closely with staff to understand where you'll be growing, and making sure that we're building those assets that are intergenerational assets for a number that are going to be around for a significant amount of years, that is wise investment. There is lots of different areas we could invest, and so we do have to work out where the best place is, and that is where we're very much guided by yourself, the council, and your plans. One thing that we kind of worked hard over the last year was trying to work with the council team to make sure that we can deliver efficiency, and a big part of that is we recognise that you're one of the councils in your team that are very timely. You really work to provide the information when we need it to help with our planning, and that's gone really well. Corridor access requests are processed really quickly and thoroughly, and so you're enabling us to do our work on time. So we'd just kind of like to give a bit of an acknowledgement to the council staff for the work they put in and the good relationship they have with us. There are a number of areas that we want to focus on in the future, and we kind of spoke to these last time, and that is in the areas of easements over council land, and ensuring that we kind of do the work once and once only. So when it comes to street furniture, that we know clearly what your intentions are around those, and that's where that ongoing dialogue is key for us to make sure that we kind of cause as little disruption as possible to the customers. But we'll continue to engage with the staff on that, and as I say, we'd just like to thank the staff for the work they have done with our team in that space. So this kind of brings us on to what we've got next, and not expecting you guys to be able to read and this slide fully, but it should give you a good sense of over the next 10 years. We do have a lot of major projects in the Castle North City and the surrounding areas, and Alex will speak to those shortly around some of those key projects, and then we can go into some questions and answers around how this may align with some of your vision or any other questions you may have. For the key thing to kind of be aware is we're just entering, or we're kind of going to be publishing our next 10-year plan on the 1st of April 2021. So that plan will gain this information you're seeing is kind of form the basis of that, but that is the key document, our asset management plan, that will outline kind of where we're focusing our attentions based on the knowledge we have at the moment. So what I'll just do now is I'll just pass over to Alex, who'll just take a couple of minutes to pull out some highlights about this growth plan that's coming up in the next year to 10 years, and then we'd like to open the floor to the councillors and staff for any questions.
Good morning, Councillor Dennison.
Good.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to this map because it is small text, but the picture that it paints is that PowerCo is investing, as Oliver says, heavily in this Manawatu area and the surrounds. And the highlights would be the larger projects, being the cable installations that Oliver's mentioned within the CBD of Palmerston North, and installation of the new Ferguson Street substation. So those cables provide additional capacity between the substations in the city, and that builds both capacity and resilience, and spreading the load a little bit as well on the lower voltage feeders for reliability and longer term growth capacity. In the bigger picture, historically Palmerston North relies upon Bunnythorpe and Linton. They're the connections to the national grid, and in the next couple of years we are building an interconnect between Bunnythorpe and Martin GXP. So what that's doing is moving, or giving us the potential to move about 10% of Bunnythorpe's load off to the Martin GXP, and also about another 10% down to Linton. And so that is sort of depressurising that Bunnythorpe connection to the national grid, and that gives us again some room for growth, healthy growth in that area. We're also seeing, as a result of the growth in this region, some transformers that are approaching their capacity, not their full capacity in the substation, but just the firm capacity over the next 5 years. And that the firm capacity is essentially half the capacity of the substation. And so longer term, we need to ensure that we build greater capacity in several substations. So Sanson substation, Kauranga, Kelvin Grove, they will see larger transformers in the next 5 years, or 5 to 7 years. And so we're investing heavily into interconnects, larger transformers, but also we need to respond to specific site growth, as in Kiwi Rail's hub and other larger industrial sites. Therefore, in the next AMP, which Oliver said that we were drafting presently this year, we will add, in addition to this, what's listed on this page, we'll add another sort of northeast industrial substation. And we're also looking to Fielding to install a second substation in Fielding, just to spread the load a bit and not have that capacity concentrated in one substation, for reliability purposes, for resilience, and also for future growth. In addition, there are some projects listed on that page, at lower value projects, which are renewal, and so some old assets will be replaced. And we appreciate the council's permission for us to, we appreciate in hindsight the ability to have the overhead line that is just temporary, and so we'll make sure that we remove that before the end of the agreement, and we're working hard to do that. We have a lot of work to do. Linton will see a much bigger switchboard in that area, so that helps us service the Turitea and that area growth, and also provide more security, because historically it was supplied by Ring from Bunnythorpe and Linton. We're going to provide another supply straight from Linton. So big investment in capacity with resilience in mind, and it should see us well. into the future. But yeah, I just want to reiterate Oliver's mention that we work closely with the council, particularly Nigel Borst, who's here today, on the ground, and the working relationship is very valuable to us delivering on these investments.
Thank you, Alex. So, yeah, any of the remaining time, we'd just like to open it to the floor for any other comments and general questions between us. We'll see what we can answer.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. We have our first question, which is online from Councillor Butt.
Councillor, can you unmute yourself, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Alex and Oliver. In your third slide, it is said that you have managed 11,000 tree sites. Does that mean sites or 11,000 trees? Plus, when you say managed, is it removal of a tree or just, trimming or something done with a single tree? Can you please elaborate on this action?
Yep, that's tree site. So a tree site can be a range of a range of things. It can mean a single tree that's complete removal, or it may be cut back of vegetation. Obviously, the trees a lot of the time are on private property, and we're working to government regulations around what we can do to different sites. So that's 11,000 sites that can be a group of trees or a single tree, but that is where we classify it as a job where we go out and we work on that site.
Happy with that, Councillor Butt?
Okay. Another question related to that, Mr. Chair, if you allow.
Certainly.
Yeah, when you remove a tree or a group of trees, are you replacing them at somewhere else, or it is once it is gone, it is gone?
Currently, once it's gone, it's gone. However, this last 12 months, we started an initiative where we've planted 2,500 trees in the back block within Taranaki as start of our commitment to trying to replace a tree for every tree we cut down, we replace with. So this is a new initiative that started in conjunction with our tree provider over the last year, and if it proves to be a successful initiative, we'll roll it out. So while these trees are often on private property, or can be the likes of council property, we're still kind of making our commitment to trying to replace those trees. It's just they're not in the location where they were causing initial problems.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions, if I may. Thank you, gentlemen. Just to follow up on the point made about the Main Street overhead, when do you expect to have that out and underground again?
Yeah, obviously it's relying on works that are underway to progress successfully. And so we have to deliver two very high capacity cables down through the Massey and Crown land from Linton down across the new pedestrian bridge. Once we've done that and upgrade the Linton switchboard, then it can be removed. And so we're looking to Nigel progressing the works over the summer for the cables, and the ODID, the Linton switchboard, is later next year. And so it'll be immediately after that we'll be moving.
I look forward to that. And the next question is probably related, because the complaint I think we hear most as city council is about overhead lines. And I noted your complaints figure on slide 2, you said was down 15% compared to the previous year, but there's no quantum there to know. Is that 100 complaints? Is that 100,000 complaints?
Across our network of kind of 360,000 customers, we kind of average about 100 complaints a month, is what we, and it varies significantly because of storms. In reality, a majority of our complaints are related to loss of supply during storms. So it's the usual story. If you have a nice, good, mild winter, complaint numbers drop out. At the same time, one storm can double the amount of complaints. So there is some variability in that. We are working hard to work with our contractors to remove those small annoyance complaints that can happen for individuals rather than groups of people, and that's probably where we've seen the most gain at the moment with trying to work with individuals rather than in storm situations, because that's slightly out of our control. But as kind of Alex has indicated in the work we're doing, a lot of this kind of major backbone work is actually creating more resilience in the network. And so while it's not undergrounding network, what it's meaning is we're able to get customers' supply up faster, and there's not so many capacity issues on the lines.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Oh, sorry, I elevated you. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, gentlemen. My questions are about the parts of Palmerston North that still have overhead cabling in the streets. So very many years ago, there was a progressive programme rolled out to underground Palmerston North, and it appeared to do most of the city, but unfortunately, in the areas, particularly of Highbury, it was suspended, and we still have overground cabling in Highbury. And given all your comments about resilience and how that's your strategic approach is to improve resilience, and that overhead cabling obviously is susceptible to weather and trees, I'm wondering if you've got a timeline for undergrounding the streets of Highbury.
Short answer is no. Don't have a timeline. The investments were prioritised. The bigger picture initially in Palmerston North, given that we were going into a regulatory period with elevated spending capability, and therefore we prioritised on the bigger picture and sorting out the capacity for future growth. And so I can get back to you, but I don't have a timeline on that. Sorry.
So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Nigel from PowerCo. There was a program, you're right, some time ago. I wasn't the PowerCo, so I can't really speak about that. But yes, there was a undergrounding program. We put a lot of the overhead underground. But yes, you're right, there are some pockets. What we've been trying to do with the council is work in with the ultra-fast broadband rollout. So there are some areas where we're actually putting in infrastructure underground, just ready for that time when perhaps the assets are at the end of their life, then we can remove them. It is a very expensive exercise, and there are pros and cons about doing that. But generally, when areas are being either resurfaced through new paths or footpaths, or as I say, with the ultra-fast broadband, we'll put in some infrastructure there so we can come back and at least run cables through there. But it is, I suppose, a long-term plan. But yeah, it's no definite time frame on that. Thank you.
So can I have a follow-up on that, please?
Absolutely.
So is it still in your plan? Because I see your planned growth in Palmerston North diagram, but I don't see that on it.
So I think the long and short of where Nigel and Alex were going is we're as a regulated business, we have to do that the trade-off and understand where the best level of investment is for our entire customer base. So it's not explicitly in a plan as a line item with a date, but as Nigel says, we're trying to ensure we deliver efficiently, and part of that is looking at the opportunities of when other works are occurring. So yeah, we can kind of have a discussion around that offline, but there is not a clear date to say that the area is going undergrounding by this date. It's a rolling, like across the rest of our network, exercise.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my apologies for lateness, just on a bit of council business there, but welcome to our PowerCo colleagues. You've got quite a big investment in Ferguson Street, that substation. Is that new, or is that just really vamping up at $27 million alone? It's obviously a big investment.
Yeah, yes, it is, and it's not just the building. It's high capacity cables between Pascoe Street, Main Street, Key Street, all those substations, and Ferguson. So it's a all of city resilience project. It's the 27 million is not just for the building. The building will be a portion of that, but it also includes the high capacity cables that we're still installing down from Linton. So it's really a PNCBD project, that's what we call it, not just the Ferguson project. It is listed like that, you're correct.
So will it be like the Linton Street new substation? It'll be quite a significant piece of kit?
Yes, we're about 60% through the works that encompass within that 27 million. The Ferguson Street building is there. We still have to put the new Ferguson Street building. We have to put another second transformer in there, high capacity, and so we'll keep doing that. We also have to bring another high capacity cable in between Main Street and Ferguson Street. But we haven't invested the full amount, but we have a large portion of it.
Excuse my ignorance, but whereabouts in Ferguson Street is it?
Opposite Pack and Save, across the road. Yeah, it's designed to not look like a substation, so it's easy to miss.
Okay.
It's part of our commitment to it.
Right, and also you list on the major projects there, the existing wind farms, which obviously have reasonable connections to them, but there was nothing around the new wind farm, the new Mercury one. Is that, do they just supply their own, or how does that fit into your network?
Yeah, there are several wind farms going up, obviously, in the western footprint that I developed for and with my team, and that particular wind farm is connecting directly to the national grid, so we don't have to interact with them. Whilst they supply the power that we will distribute, we don't actually have to invest assets in that instance.
Right. So is it like a road? Do they just we get a developer that vests the road to our network? Is that what they do? They're
upstream of us. Right. Yeah, they're up into the Transpower territory.
Okay.
We have a point at the GXP where our assets sort of end and theirs begin, and right. So they're connecting up above. So if they're below and within our distribution or subtrans network, then we will perhaps invest with them or negotiate with them. But in this case, we didn't have to.
Okay. Just one more, Mr. Chair. Just on the overhead questions that Councillor Johnson was speaking to. We had a project, a combined project with NZTA, ourselves, and Chorus, and unfortunately we couldn't get PowerCo to the table with some undergrounding in the middle of Ashurst. Wasn't a huge amount of money, but I suppose it's more of a comment that I just would like to signal that when we do come to the table, it'd be nice to have the other side come to the table as well. It was a relatively small bit of undergrounding, which would have done quite a lot for a village of nearly 5,000 people that have all their power lines above ground. So we'd strongly advise you to have a look at that next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, both. Two questions that I've got. The first one is just around trying to understand that final slide that had the numbers on it of the millions of dollars being invested in this region, and without the sort of numbers across New Zealand, it's a little bit hard to place that in context and understand if we're sort of getting what we might think of as our fair share. And I guess you've heard a couple of examples here already where, we feel like there's some gap between what's needed and what's happening. And to be honest, from my perspective, I suppose when the poles went up in Napier Road, sort of felt like we were perhaps a bit, behind the eight ball or a bit vulnerable. So just really wanted to know sort of the parity of the investment that is being driven here, and are we actually, getting what we need?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll answer it to the extent that I can. In a Western footprint, which I developed for, the only equivalent region that's receiving that much investment is the Taranaki. And so Taranaki and Manawatu were targeted in our CPP1 document and application to invest at that level. And that was in response to both growth and also hearing from the community, really. And so it's on par with that. In the eastern footprint up in Tauranga and around that way, you may see investment that's greater because of the proximity to Auckland. But it's a healthy investment in this region, and it contains our largest project within PowerCo, the Fergus Street or PNCBD project. And so that sort of gives an indication that it has received quite a healthy portion of the CPP budget.
And do you make those comparisons further afield as well, or is it sort of just looking at parity within your own network?
I think we've got, we're very, very open and transparent, and part of our commitment to our 5-year investment project with the Commerce Commission was to provide exactly the information you're asking for online and in documentation. So last year we did produce a document that's actually had the numbers that you're asking for on our network across on there, and I'm more than happy to provide access to that document. Again, it's still online at the moment. So there's an element of timing in there as well, and also type of work that customers need. So when we look down in the Wairarapa region, a lot of their work is about renewals and lines. So their investment isn't tied to major projects, whereas the likes of Taronga and Palmerston North, a lot of growth projects are, and that's where they have similar investment amounts in this period of time. So yeah, those numbers are available. Again, they're available in the asset management plan for the next 10 years that are coming out on the 1st of April. So yeah, more than happy to kind of provide those and share those. But yeah, I'd like to say that yeah, I suppose we PowerCo were the first company to submit a CPP, a customised price plan 2 years ago to make this step up to allow us to make this level of investment. So if you look at our investment per population on our network, we're investing significantly more than the other 28 businesses that do the same services that we do.
Great, thanks. And yeah, maybe you could send that information through the admin and we could have that circulated. It'd be great. Second question that I had was just really around the sort of future focus. And I know, you know, Transpower and the generators are talking about a future that's quite different from the present. It's quite an electric future. And one where we're talking about, you know, distributed battery storage, a lot more EVs, charging, discharging, all that sort of stuff. So in your asset management planning, what sort of future are you planning for, and how well is it geared up for that sort of future?
I'll start the response. Yeah. Yes, that's a really good question, and it's on our mind. This year we have reshuffled internally to focus the expertise on the future technology challenges, I suppose, and opportunities. And so we are looking into distributed generation and higher technology devices out on the network, and particularly communication between those devices and our central control, and visibility on the network as well, down into the lower voltage networks. Greater visibility using high-tech devices, low cost. So those sort of initiatives will be written into our this year's AMP, which is published early next year, and that will provide our plan, our investment plans, etc., into the future for the next 10 years. But yeah, for now we're absorbing the information and we're developing those strategies.
Yeah, and I'll probably kind of slightly expand on that in terms of, we know change is happening, so it's a question of timing for us. So we know there is going to be more EVs, and we do have a network transformation team that are looking at trials around EV uptake, how that changes people's behaviour, where loads are, and we're kind of conscious that we invest in intergenerational assets, so we need to get that investment right, and we need to get that timing right. So our approach is to ensure that we're currently building a network that's going to be flexible enough to adapt to the future needs without putting all our eggs in one basket and saying that it's either going to be solar or EVs or what it will look like. So we're very, very conscious of it. We work hard on it. We do have continual trials around new technologies, but we're also conscious that we're consulting a lot more with our customers to try and make sure we've got a current understanding of how fast this uptake of EVs is, how they're using solar, and what is changing in their lives and in society that will affect how our network needs to be developed, because it will cause us problems if we invest in the wrong areas at the wrong time. So we don't take it lightly.
Great, thank you. Appreciate you both being here. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Just a question following on from the Mayor's comments around the around PowerCo not essentially coming to the table for a opportunity in Ashurst. I guess I'm wondering if there is a threshold of work that we need to be aware of, because your response to Councillor Johnson was around opportunities for resealing roads and taking those up. But the piece of work that the Mayor's talking about is the main strip of Ashurst, which is just being resealed and had some significant works done, and Powerco refused to engage. So is there something we should be aware of around threshold when looking at these opportunities?
It's a really good question, and I can't speak to that specific example. However, perhaps Shirley might want to, but we are mindful of the council's intent to have cables underground, and not only this council but other councils. And so when we react to other utilities digging in the ground or planning to dig in the ground, we try and align to that. We don't have a merged map of future works yet with other utilities, and we're working on that. Quarterly catch-ups with them, but it will be more. We'll be more able to see the future opportunities once we've done that. For now, yes, we are reactive in some extent, and we also have to gauge whether investing in some of those, in putting ducts in the ground or cables in the ground in reaction to other utilities is actually advantageous to us or for that community in that instance and at that time. So yes, we have to.
And the timing is a key factor, because undergrounding a cable the complexity of the network, how it's structured, the type of cabling, there is timing can be an issue, because it isn't a case of just taking the cable, just laying it underground and it's good to go. It does take a lot of planning and making sure that investment's right. So some opportunities do come and go where we can't. I can't speak to this situation specifically, but we do get a lot of these requests. If money was unlimited, we'd love the whole of the network to be underground. As you can imagine, it would solve a significant amount of our problems. Unfortunately, it's not. The costs come back to our customers, so we're very mindful of doing that kind of reliability price trade-off. But yeah, it's always worth bearing in the back of the mind that these projects, the reason we plan 10 years out, like other infrastructure that the council manages, does take a lot of planning, and there is a lot of complexity. So sometimes it doesn't align as well as we'd hope.
Just a follow-up question then, because I think your comments around timing are useful to know. This conversation has been going on for 2 years, so maybe that wasn't long enough in terms of lead-in. Is there a longer time frame required? Are you planning this kind of stuff 5 years in advance, and so 2 years isn't sufficient, or? Again,
it comes down to the type of job, and like I say, we do believe we've got a good relationship with the council staff, and we are continually talking. And at this point, all I can kind of say is to continue talking to the likes of Shirley and Nigel, who maintain those relationships, and especially on these specific ones. Obviously, the earlier insight we have on anything, the better. And yeah, we just need to work together on these type of projects. But take on board your point.
We would like to work together on these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. On your slide 3, you're talking about your 5-year investment progress, and there's year 2. Now, are the figures here the year 2 figures or the year 5 figures?
The slide I believe you're talking about, they are for the period that ended ended 31st of March 2020, so they're for last year's figures. I think one of the figures on there of the total renewal cost is an accumulation of the 2 years, but they're not the 5-year ones.
Okay, so you got $285 million with renewals. That's for the last 2 years.
Yes, combined. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Now, is it the policy of Powerco to look at undergrounding across the whole area in time, or not?
It would be probably driven, prioritised within the city initially in centres, major centres, and then would work out from there, unless there was a specific reliability issue that drove us underground, or a capacity issue for a large industrial site, etc.
Yeah, because I was quite interested to see you get 4,073 new poles put in the last 2 years. So there's obviously a lot of new poles going up and not that much undergrounding.
Yep, and a lot of those poles are associated with the areas, the likes of coastal and rural Taranaki or the Wairarap, particularly where they're coming to the end of their life. They're in rural environments. I don't have the figure on top of with me, but I believe I have been quoted in the past somewhere between 10 and 16% more expensive to underground the line than it is to have it as an overhead line. Obviously, that significantly depends on the environment, but when you're talking about rural communities, you may have one or two customers on a long, stringy piece of line that that would be kind of millions of dollars for a couple of customers. So there will be no intention of undergrounding the entire network over a period of time. It's just where best spend for our customers.
So what I'm trying to find out it really is that at the present stage, Powerco has no policy as such to underground cables in built-up areas or in cities. Would that be true?
What I think we have a policy where when we do renewal work, it is considered and reviewed, and where it's economical to do so, it is considered, but there is no policy to say we have a goal of undergrounding X amount of cables in these places within this period of time. There are so many different variables that you're just setting yourself up to fail if you make those type of commitments.
Okay, I'm just a little bit confused now over, especially with the ashes, because there's been work being done, and you could have done that work for other people, but it wasn't done, and I can't get my head around why it wasn't done. That's all. But thank you anyway.
Was there some additional comment, Nigel, you wanted to make?
Yeah, just quickly, I would like to know a bit more about the ashes job. Just generally with customer work, we have got the capacity within our customer services team to actually invest more for undergrounding. So there shouldn't be a barrier, especially if we have new customer connections to one or two lots in a new subdivision. If we need to get that cable across the road, we can invest a bit more to actually underground that cable, under a road to that new subdivision. All brand new subdivisions are underground. So, but yeah, we have to realise that, say, in a place like Ashurst, if we were going to underground certain sections of the network, every single customer's overhead has to be undergrounded. So that means buy-in from the council, from Powerco, and also from the customers as well. So as I say, it's quite a big process. It's not that we don't want to do it, but as I say, any new work, we certainly look at what is the best option, and we do have the capacity to invest extra into undergrounding certain parts of the network. So we definitely actively look at that on the customer space.
Thank you. Thank you. Just in regards to that 10-year investment plan, could I understand what the investment is for Palmerston North in that plan? Is that broken down? Are you able to give some sort of indication of what that might be?
We have a previous AMP and we're drafting one this year. I can't give you the figures, honest, for the last AMP. It's because we haven't got defined boundaries on it. It sort of merges, and the interconnects merge with other regions across the Rangitikei and down into Karua. So no, I can't give that, but we can get back to you certainly.
That's okay, thank you. And as far as employment opportunities go, that's a significant, I didn't see all the figures just by that you had with the regional investment plan, but does that transfer into growth and employment over the next period? Employment for, like, just getting an understanding of your local employees
for that, so we're into the second year of this big step change investment that we applied to the Commerce Commission for, and so we've the bulk of that step change has already occurred 2 years ago in terms of we don't directly employ field staff. We have contracted field staff. So the step up it was in a region of kind of 40-45% in work across our network that required 2 years ago for further for our contractors to recruit further resources at that point in time. The remainder 3 years of this regulatory period that we're in, this 5 years, is more. We've kind of made the step change. It's plateaued now, and it's delivering at that level. So no, you'll see that we're building a new office in Palmerston North at the moment. We've, as a company, we have growth across our workforce, including what's based in Palmerston North, but the numbers aren't significant. The main step has already occurred.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. I'll just check if there's any other questions. There being no other questions, I'd just like to thank you all for coming and giving us an update on PowerCo's activity. Understanding for us that's a critical infrastructure for our city to grow and for the resilience that you mentioned throughout. Large investment coming still, and we look forward to working through. You can see the desire for many of the members here around the undergrounding and whether there's possibilities to work to achieve some of that. We'd love. But yeah, thank you all for your commitment to come today and inform us on what's ahead, what you've done and what's ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you. I'd now like to move that we receive the presentation for information, seconded by Councillor Petrinas. Open it up for any comments. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pity that the PowerCo have just left, because just want to acknowledge them as a city utility partner, and obviously their clear investment plan they've got into the network. Obviously the new regional office down Fitzherbert Avenue, being built by Rangatane, right next to the Quest Hotel, and just that general improvement in the network, which is with all the growth that's happening here. And I didn't want to ambush them, but it is an opportunity to talk to them about the undergrounding. And I think it's been lost that the undergrounding was done by the MED, which the city owned, and it forewent dividends to invest back into the network. And the Taurongas, the New Plymouths, the Wanganuis didn't do that. And ironically, you see the power lines above the older streets there. But in Palmerston North, we did invest in that. And it's one of the city's unsung qualities, that visual aspect. Now, what is missing now is a program line from PowerCo to do some work where possible. The work that was to be done, which would have made a massive difference to the community of Ashurst, which is like, a Stratford, and other areas would deserve it as well. But it would have made quite a difference, and it was at the same time as the city was doing some work, NZTA were doing work, and Chorus were doing work, and yet we just couldn't get the partner to the table. So we do need to keep some pressure on to enable them, and officers do as well, and I know they've worked hard, but it's because of the investment the city made many years ago, which gets lost in the heritage or the story. So I would like to see PowerCo invest where possible, a small amount every year, to help us make some of these streets that have not had treatment, and a lot of them are in the Clovelly area, some in the Highbury area, but mostly in that Clovelly area, which they were the remaining part to be done. And when MED went off council's books, it all stopped. So, look, I acknowledge that they are doing some good work, but it would be lovely to see them perhaps do a little bit more around the undergrounding of some of those older streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Johnson.
Yes. I guess, councillors, you would have sensed my frustration in asking the questions, because whilst it's great to see a plan going forward of investment around the area, something that we've been trying to get investment in for some time, it just seems to be missing from the bigger picture, and that to me is quite disappointing. there was talk about resilience and talk about the need for cables to be underground and the cost and the complaints of lack of service because of trees. But then when it comes to actually getting the cables underground, there doesn't seem to be a commitment to that going forward. Now, you know, we as a council, we've got a programme. It's been a programme in the 10-year plan for a long time. There's a current programme which amounts to around about 4 million over 10 years of the 10-year plan for undergrounding, programme 829. And yet we're not getting the buy-in or the commitment from PowerCo to do it. Ashurst is one example. There are other examples from my part of town where ultra-fast broadband was put in by Chorus. The streets were dug up for that. There was no undergrounding of power lines done at that point when there could have been. So, you know, there is a frustration, certainly from me, and I'm sure from other people, that it's great to see the plan going forward, but something that's very important to the city and something that I see it as an equity issue, that there are suburbs and parts of the town that have not had their lines undergrounded and others that are, you know, sitting pretty with their underground cables. And it really is important that PowerCo understand that this is something that we want for the city going forward, that we've committed money to it, and that we're prepared to work with them to achieve it. And I'd like the next time they come in to actually see that in their 10-year plan.
Thank you, Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The time I've been in council, this has been one of the things that has come and kept coming to our council. I can remember probably 15 years ago, a group of residents in Cloverleigh came to us really begging us that we would do something about undergrounding the network. At that stage, we tried to negotiate or talk to PowerCo, and we got nowhere. And I find that their attitude towards undergrounding in our city has not changed since then. Obviously, they wouldn't even talk to us about Ashurst. When can we get them to actually talk to us seriously about changing the hazards of overhead lines in the city? There seems to be very little enthusiasm from them to do so.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll also voice similar concerns. I can see PowerCo in the foyer. It's a shame that they can't actually hear what it is that we're saying. But we all know that this is not a new issue. Actually, Mr. Jones from Cloverleigh has raised this as part of our annual budget and LTP considerations year after year after year, and well before the 2010 when I came on board this particular council. The undergrounding in our western suburbs has been an issue for quite some time. What we heard this morning, some of the good work that PowerCo are doing in our city, but we also heard that, consideration needs to be given around the logistical aspects around rural areas. This is not a rural area. This is an urban area in our city that we're talking about. And whilst we've talked a wee bit about resilience, I think the fact that the western part of our city is a fairly resilient part of our community has meant that they've put up with a lower level of service in other parts of the city as well. So that's disappointing. For me, PowerCo talked about the consideration of investment for the customer base. Everyone around this table has some connection to the western part of the city. Either we live there or we are members of communities of interest that function there. So to learn that it's not even at this stage on the table or in any of their plans is even more disappointing. So as the Mayor has said, perhaps we are the architect of our own misfortune in the sense of the city in its history being forward-focused and wanting to do things. And that might be just a matter of the misfortune catching up for us. But I would hope that given PNCC is prepared to be at the table and has demonstrated that it wishes to be at the table, that it's now over to PowerCo to demonstrate that they actually want to target some investment in an area that will actually make a difference for people in this city.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Along similar lines, I asked a question about the complaints stats that were in that presentation, because I know for me, and I'm sure for all of you. It's one of the things people regularly talk to me about, complain about, is the overhead lines in the city. You know, when the Main Street overhead went in, people were shocked that we would have gone backwards into having overhead lines. That doesn't begin to talk about our communities that have never had underground lines, that have always had overground. The Mayor and I were at a community art event a couple of weeks ago called I Choose Highbury, where they were asked to share photos of the beautiful parts of their neighbourhood and the parts that they'd like to see changed. And overhead cables turned up quite a lot in the parts they'd like to see changed. Some rather wonderful photos of them, but that didn't change the fact that that community sees it as an issue day by day. And $4 million in our long-term plan isn't enough to get that fixed. And working on our own, we won't get that fixed. So whatever we can do to advance that partnership with PowerCo and bring these very real, they might be low-level issues in terms of the millions of dollars of investment that PowerCo have talked to us about today, but they're not low-level issues to the communities that live with them. And we can work hard to get something on the table with PowerCo. Thank you.
Great. No further comments. I'll just make a couple of summaries around, again, our desire for the underground cabling, and that come clear through in the questions. Clearly, they have a significant investment into this wider region, and it seems to be, from their response, in the ballpark of what's our fair share. I was quite comfortable as far as that goes, and certainly recognising our growth and our need for resilience. And appreciated that they brought a number of their representatives here to make sure that they could answer the questions fully and outline where they see their investment for the next period. So I have a large acknowledgement of thanks for them to do that today. I will now call for a vote. And shall I call? Yep, Councillor Butt.
Yes.
Councillor Hancock.
Yes.
Thank you. That is passed unanimously. Thank you. Moves us on to the minutes from our meeting of the 5th of August. I'm happy to move them as a true and correct record, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Open it up for any matters arising. There being none, I'd like to invite you to vote. Again, Councillor Butt.
Yes.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, 4.
Thank you. And that's passed unanimously. Item 7 is the Asset Management Improvement Plan update, and welcome Jono Ferguson Pye, our Manager for Assets and Planning. Floor's yours. Welcome. Sorry, Jono, yeah, your mic.
Is that better? Thank you. So yeah, just talking to the Asset Management Improvement Plan Update Memorandum. I guess the issue that the memorandum is addressing is sort of the asset management practice element of audit and improvement planning, which is, I guess, part of the continuous improvement process associated with asset management planning, and I guess an area that councillors have indicated concern with in the past in terms of us completing and moving forward with our asset management improvement planning. So last year when we came to the Audit and Risk Committee in May, the Asset Planning Division said that we would commission a asset management maturity assessment, and that really was around shining some light on understanding, you know, what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses in our asset management practice across the organisation, and also to help us better inform the approach and the resourcing of our improvement plan, so that we get best bang for buck out of that investment on behalf of our community. So the purpose of the maturity assessment really was to look at the level of our asset management maturity across the whole organisation. So we interviewed our asset management planning, is it just around And the responsibility doesn't just sit within the infrastructure unit, but it sits right across the organisation. So we interviewed people from staff from the customer unit, from finance, from strategy and planning. And we looked at the asset management practice elements such as, strategy and planning, how does that feed into our asset management, forecasting demand, risk, procurement, and so on. And that assessment essentially made a number of recommendations, which we've turned into improvement tasks that we need to try and close the gap on over time. So just the summary of the findings, essentially the findings were that for an organisation the size of council and recognising the assets, the risk and the complexity of the services that we're delivering, we should be operating at a high intermediate level of asset management practice, which is at 80. And the assessment assessed us at operating at 51, which is at a core level of asset management practice. So there's a significant gap there of 29 that we need to close over time. The assessment noted that managing risk and audit and improvement were two of the bigger areas that we need to address over time. But also I think if we look at how we apply those asset management elements in the management of our assets and the services that we deliver with those assets, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone around the table that the property and the stormwater areas were the areas that scored the lowest. And I know our Parks and Reserve manager is here today and they scored the highest. They're very strong in the operation area especially. So that just gave us a bit of a picture where we were sitting. The report also tried to display those findings and the gaps through a traffic light table or a heat map in the report. So really it provides a different view on the maturity picture. So where we have green squares, the gap is smaller, and where we have the red and orange squares, it's saying that we need to improve in our asset management approach in those areas. A key recommendation coming out of the assessment was that the Asset Planning Division develop a monitoring reporting system, which we've done. Thank you to Shane Allen out of our team, who's done a great job in doing that. So we've got all the improvement items in that system, and once we go through the asset management plans and develop those and the improvement plans associated with those improvement items will go in also. I think it's probably worth knowing that a key element to making sure we drive the improvement plan is the formation of the asset management steering group. So that group provides a governance or an oversight to asset management practice across the organisation to make sure it's resourced and has the visibility. And the key function of that steering group will be to hold the Asset Planning Division accountable for driving the improvement plan over time. So trying to learn from where we've come from, obviously we had a number of improvement plan in the previous AMPs, but as discussed in the report, they were never budgeted or resourced or operationalised. So we are proposing a budget in the upcoming LTP to help us with some of the heavy lifting in terms of closing those gaps. And just lastly, because the Asset Planning Division is a relatively new team within the organisation, our work plan, just to make you aware, at the midpoint of year 2 through to the midpoint of year 3, our focus is on developing the asset management plans and the program of works in collaboration with other parts of the organisation. And then from the midpoint of year 3 to midpoint of year 2 in the next LTP, our focus is really on driving those asset management plan tasks moving forward. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jono. We have questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Jono. Can you clarify in your list of things that were assessed, you've got managing risk and audit and improvement as areas that had big gaps. Is that managing risk as it applies to asset management, or is that across the whole organisation?
The focus is on managing risk related to asset management, but I think it's probably fair to say that there's commonalities around how we manage risk right across the decisions we make across the council. So probably fair to say that some of the recommendations around developing a risk management policy and a framework and reporting is probably needed across other parts of the organisation and the practice as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock, which is online, so we'll just bring him in.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Jono. Probably my question is really just a follow-on from Councillor Johnson's. Really, is the council utilising a formal risk management framework to actually build into our asset management or other parts of our decision-making process?
Look, we are working with the risk manager, or the previous risk manager, and I think we're about to appoint a new risk manager. My understanding is that we do have a policy and that the framework is currently being developed, and also, I guess, the ability for staff to engage in a, I guess, in a database to be able to register risk across the organisation. My understanding is that work is underway at the moment through the finance team.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Sorry, if I can just have a follow-up question. So is there any plan to actually integrate that into, like, for example, the project management or asset management process?
Yeah, look, I think I'll leave Tom to answer that question.
Absolutely. So in the context of the PMO, we've done risk identification around all our projects, and we've populated those within project status. So I guess we had a risk manager at council probably for an 8-month period, and during that period we did a lot of risk ID, and I believe there's a draft policy. That role sat vacant for a few months, and we're waiting for the new risk manager to arrive. But yeah, the intention is to integrate risk management, not just in the asset management function, in the project delivery function, in the maintenance function, in all the areas across infrastructure and indeed the wider organisation.
Thank you, Tom. Sorry, just one last question. Is there a timeline on that at all?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. At this stage, I do not have a timeline, but it's something we could work towards getting and bringing back to council.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and thanks, Johnny. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Petrinas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Johnny, for your report. Looking at the roading area and the roading asset, since 1991, the roading section has been using RAM. So how are you looking at integrating that with what you're proposing at the present time?
What we're looking at doing in I guess the asset management data space is we've got RAM for the transport data, we've got IPS for the underground data, and we are using SPM for the roading data. One thing that our asset information team is looking at doing is using Power BI to sort of integrate that database so that we can actually generate reports right across the databases. So a classic example at the moment is, if we're looking at a renewal, say a water and a wastewater renewal on Tremaine Avenue, for example, and there's a renewal requirement there in 2025, and then there's a renewal requirement for Curb and Channel there, say in 2028, being able to actually make sure the databases talk to each other so we get some efficiencies around sort of timing, so that we're not doing two separate renewals, but we're bringing it together as one renewal, so that those databases are talking to each other. They're not quite doing that at the moment.
Agree with that, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, John, for the report. It refers early on in the report to using the New Zealand Treasury framework. Is this the first time we've used that for this purpose?
Yeah, I think in terms of best practice in this area, that's what the industry is using, and using ISO 55000 to inform the use of that. So it is something that has been used across the country to assess asset maturity. I think it's seen as having some pedigree. My understanding is we haven't undertaken a maturity assessment like this before. I could be wrong, but I've sort of looked at some documentation going back and I can't find anything. So certainly I think within the last 10 or 15 years we haven't done an assessment like this.
Great, thanks. And I guess the question I wanted to get at then is a bit of asking you to assess the assessment, but you know, because you've been thinking about this space quite comprehensively, and now you've sort of picked up a tool that is being used in other jurisdictions, etc. But as you worked through that process, was your feeling that it was a good framework to be using, that was sort of appropriate to our city, etc., or were there still some gaps that sort of didn't actually get picked up with that assessment process?
My gut feeling says to me it's fit for purpose for what we need. So when I was talking to our activity managers, there was a real consistent message around issues around asset condition and performance, under investment and renewals. There's some issues around data and how we're using it. And so there was a gut feel in the organisation around what these issues were. Risk was another one. And I think what this report did was sort of just reinforce the gut feeling of activity managers of where the issue sat. So it's sort of, and from my point of view, I think for the moment anyway, it's fit for purpose. We are looking at carrying this out every 3 years so that we can monitor the extent to which we're closing that gap.
Great, thanks. And just to follow up then around that sort of ongoing monitoring of it, have you thought about what the sort of validation process would be in that monitoring? Because sometimes when you sort of internally implement monitoring functions, there's a desire to sort of show incremental improvement where it may not actually exist, and sort of how you're actually going to keep a robust process around this so that we've got high confidence in this.
So this is an outside agency that does this report. So this is I guess what we wanted to do is sort of fresh set of eyes on where we were with asset management. So I'm fairly comfortable that the organisation that's undertaken this report is sort of hasn't sugarcoated it for us. So I'm fairly happy that we're getting an independent and sort of well-informed feedback from the assessment.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There's no further questions, Jono. Thank you for your memorandum. I'll move that the committee receive the memorandum Asset Management Improvement Plan Update. That'll be received. Seconded by Councillor Petrinas. Open it up for any comments, debate. No, Councillor Johnson, floor's yours.
Just a quick comment, which I think is probably self-evident, but just so that we're all prepared. I expect this is going to be a very large line item when it comes forward into the long-term plan. And, there will be competing priorities when we're trying to, decide what's in and what's out in the long-term plan. But this, and in particular, the gaps that have been identified here and the means of addressing them, I think are probably quite critical to success in that asset area for us. So I just ask you all to make a mental note for when this comes up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to add some comment in that line that not to sugarcoat it. This is bringing forward the information that we probably were guessing at was under the surface, and it's we know now with this monitoring exactly the gap, and I think that's actually a good thing. But you're right, when we come to the long-term plan, it's going to have a line item and it's going to have a dollar figure, and that's where rubber hits the road. So thank you for the memorandum and all the good work that you're doing to compile the investigation, the inquiry, and getting some of the monitoring tools so we can actually see our progress from this point on. No other comments? I'll now invite a vote. Sorry, Councillor Butt?
Yes.
Councillor Hancock?
For.
Thank you. That is passed unanimously. Item 8. And that is the 6-month Transport Network Safety Update Report. And welcome, Robert Van Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've just asked Chris Lyon, my transport engineer, to join me in case there are some questions I can't answer. Look, we pretty much take the report as read. Just 2 clarifications. This is the second 6-month update in a few months. That's because we wanted to align this report with the time frame that we think will best. Well, essentially it's about the data that we have available. So that's the reason why we're coming to this. So it's a modest change from the previous report. And I suppose the second matter, just in respect of the Railway Road Roberts Line intersection, which I know was in forefront of people's minds, the short-term safety interventions and temporary speed
changes have been implemented. So I think they're mentioned in the report. So really that's all. Really we're open for questions.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Robert. I know you did say in the report that there's no obvious reason for some of the increases in crash data, but I wonder how this compares nationwide. So, in other words, you know, we've spent quite a lot of time, effort, and money trying to improve the safety of our network, and it's hard to see that there's been much improvement lately. And I wonder is that something that's reflected nationwide, or are we just are we an outlier in this, or how do we compare? Because it's hard to understand from looking at this what else we should or could be doing. So can you sort of contextualise it nationally?
In terms of national league tables for safety statistics, we actually are reasonably modest. So we are certainly nowhere near the top. We're not near the bottom for urban centres, for urban networks of this size. So the trend upwards is a national trend. So you know, that has been the challenge facing central government about how to address, you know, what has been an increasing trend literally for the last 4 years, I think, has been the issue. So hence the national initiative Road to Zero, which is part of the GPS government policy statement, and a significant recasting of the funding in NZTA to fund our national safety network program. So, and we're certainly, you know, we'll be looking to tackle, you know, some of what are perceived as our safety issues. That aside, when you go into the data within the city, you know, and you look at, maybe take the deaths that have occurred, many of those are you know, outliers. I mean, they are around all sorts of factors which are not necessarily related to or able to be influenced by the network. But it's fair to say that the city has an open transport system which does not constrain speed, has easy access. You can turn in any direction at almost all intersections. So what that results in is lots of opportunity for conflict between different modes of transport. So, you know, as the network becomes more congested and we get more vehicles of different modes, we will get more points of conflict. I mean, the irony is the urban areas which have significant congestion generally have less crash history because now traffic's moving so slowly that actually the interactions are quite low speed. But, you know, most of our network is open. There are low levels of vehicles on it, you know, at many times. So you know, I think turning around and you know, having an impact on the deaths and serious injuries and crash data will take a lot of intervention and a lot of change across the network, and it will not be something that we will see you know, turn around quickly. So yes, we have a significant range of projects and investments, but you know, they are only touching a fraction of the intersections and you know, parts of the network. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
No, thank you. No, helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Robert and Chris, for this report. Once we've decided that road safety projects are needed in a certain area, what is the process for deciding what kind of project it's going to be? I'm just looking at page 28, where 3.2.6, as a quick example, the Wood Street Pedestrian Refuge and Island there. What is it that made us decide to go with a pedestrian refuge and island as opposed to an actual crossing, given that a lot of the residents and parents in that area would actually prefer a crossing because of the Central Normal School in that zone?
I'll let Chris answer that. That's a sort of technical response. Yeah.
There's probably a perception that pedestrian crossings improve safety. There has been research by the NZTA which suggests otherwise, unless they're coupled with traffic devices that reduce speed. If you've got a crossing where I guess there's not a frequent number of pedestrians throughout the day, people don't expect pedestrians at those crossings, so they'll continue at speed. And then pedestrians think they have the right of way, which they do, but because the drivers aren't expecting them, they'll step out and then they potentially get hit. So you need to couple them with other devices, which is kind of similar to what we're actually putting out there. So it might be just a matter of adding a little bit extra with those speed reduction treatments to create a pedestrian crossing. So I guess that's something we can consider with Wood Street in this instance.
So I guess just to follow up on that, I guess I'm just trying to work out what the process is then for deciding that. So I know that you said that the new research is saying that the pedestrian crossings might not be the most safe method. Well, when you've got a lot of children going in that area and they're taught to use pedestrian crossings where, only cross at pedestrian crossings, if there are none, so how do we work out that process? What needs to happen there to get that?
I guess every site will be assessed using the guidance that's available. So there's NZTA guidance and there's Off-Road guidance. So we'll look at the specific site and the conditions and determine which treatment is appropriate. So I guess around schools, the thing that we'd like to encourage more is the use of building care crossings, which are the pedestrian school operated ones, which give priority. Further away in, residential streets where there's less pedestrian activity and there's not as much pedestrians around, things like pedestrian refuges or curb out stands, which reduces the crossing distance and gives a waiting area, is probably the next considered the most appropriate treatment.
So just quickly one more, so, if I may. So with that, then I suppose my counter to that a little bit is that there would be less pedestrians if pedestrians feel that it's unsafe to go in that area. So by putting in something like a crossing, you might actually find that there'd be a bit more pedestrians.
Yeah, I think, it speaks to a wider vision for our network. And one of the challenges we have is, even if you provide crossing places, you'll find that if those are not particularly efficient for pedestrians, they will not use them. Okay, so they will simply cross the road at the point that they think is appropriate. So it's a balance between providing safe, appropriate interventions, but also in parts of the network where there is reasonable demand, where there is a reasonable requirement for those crossings. So in the case of schools, I think we've been working actively to look at a range of strategies. Some of that Chris talked about. Maybe it's a pedestrian refuge arrangement. There may be cases where crossings are appropriate, where there's high levels of traffic all day or there's, generally movement. But in some cases, we would prefer the Kia crossing because it's focused on those time periods at the beginning and the start of the day when there are a lot of pedestrian movements, and then the rest of the day, there isn't that pressure. So, at the end of the day, the other alternative, of course, is you can make the whole street calm. You can quiet the whole environment. And that means that pedestrians are safe to cross at any point, across that road. So, that becomes the sort of, CBD type approach. So, there's a whole range of interventions, but they really need to be matched to the particular, network environment.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Next question is from Councillor Butt, who's online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Robert. On page 25, 2.15, it says, probably a typo mistake as well, but it says that the design of the roundabouts is a significant contributor in poor outcomes, safety outcomes. Can you please tell us what actually is wrong with the design, number one? Number two, when did we notice that there is something wrong with the design, and have we corrected that mistake in the newly built roundabouts?
I guess there's a lot of the roundabouts are quite different around the city, but the ones that in terms of the cyclist ones, I can think of the ones on Cook Street. So they've been designed to have a cycle lane on approach up to the roundabout itself. The safety issue with that is that they're in parallel with the vehicle that's waiting to enter the roundabout. So a cyclist might go, and then this the vehicle might go, but the vehicle is looking to their right and not notice the cyclist, so they go into the cyclist and cause the conflict that way. The guidance from the NZTA for cyclists and roundabouts is for the cyclist to actually merge with the traffic lane on approach, so that they take the lane and they're in the front of the vehicle, and then they should. So the driver behind is more aware of what's going on and can reduce the conflict that way. Other roundabouts within our network are probably designed to higher speed, in which they can go through quite quickly, which higher speeds lead to higher risk in terms of likelihood and severity of crashes. So it's looking to reduce the speed on approach and within the roundabout to improve the safety. Yeah.
Okay, happy with that. Thank you. I'll also go to the next question, which is online, which is Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Robert. Look, I just want to refer you to paragraph 3.3.4 and just the Albert Street cycleway. I'm just curious as to how advanced any design work might have actually been put into that. And the reason I ask this is because in some places on that road, there's actually a very heavy camber, which pushes cyclists out into the traffic lane. So I just really want to get some understanding what the thinking is around that. Thank you.
We're aware of the wide, the steep cambers, and we're trying to figure out solutions on how to, I guess, mitigate those and what options we have. So we're beginning the design phase at the moment, and we'll be talking with the designers on how we can best address that.
So, yeah, good point. No quick solution at this stage, but it is a challenge, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, followed by Councillor Petrunus.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Robert. Thanks, Chris. A couple of questions that I've got. The first one is just around, overall road safety. This has obviously got quite a infrastructure lens across that. When I think about road safety, I think about Horizons having some responsibility educationally in this area. I think about the police having some responsibility from an enforcement point of view. Is there I guess, any intent in terms of reporting through to council to sort of give us a more holistic lens of what's happening in road safety, or what might the future of this report look like if it actually looked at the big picture?
It's possible to add whatever councillors want to have feedback on. The reality is a lot of the interactions and I suppose in the public behaviour and education space, we engage with agencies such as police about particular issues and safety issues. But one of the issues for them is that they have limited resourcing, limited ability to actually be active in this space. So we talk about we're certainly interested to see whether they can help enforce the right behaviour in some areas in the city. But a lot of the time they just don't resourced to adequately respond in that space. So, but certainly interested. I mean, they're coming to us with requests around managing central city space, SEPTRED type issues, lighting, making areas feel safer for pedestrians and people. So, but in terms of Horizons input, yeah, we obviously we are part funding, with that work that they're involved in doing. I think we engage with them, but at this stage, I'm not clear that we have a very strong influence on some of the programs that they're involved in. So I think we find ourselves also in parallel trying to supplement the work that they're involved in. Certainly, some of the work we've been doing with schools and that sort of thing, is run in parallel to their activities. So it's an interesting model where NZTA gives most of the funding to Horizons, and then we sort of invoice Horizons and they sort of reimburse us for the NZTA portion. So I know other councils have sought to take more ownership of that that funding stream. So, but yeah, we can certainly report on some of those actions in future reports.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. Second question that comes to me in this reading this report is really quite a bit of commentary around the emphasis on improving the footpath network and getting those faults that we know about addressed, and certainly support that, but try to really trying to reconcile that with the sort of road safety aspects. I'm just wondering, we had a dozen serious pedestrian accidents in the last year. Were those caused by footpath faults?
I'm not sure. Do we have any?
There'll be just some.
Yeah, I think mostly they'll be around injuries, so they'll generally be between a pedestrian and a vehicle, or there'll be that sort of. Those are the ones that get logged in CAS. So a person tripping on the footpath is not logged as a crash statistics in the NZTA's database.
So if we're, I guess, using this report to speak to how we're addressing the safety issues around pedestrians, maybe the footpath maintenance side of things might not be such a good fit. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, maybe, but I suppose it's, people regard the network safety as being all encompassing. I think the intention is not to use only crash data, be that between pedestrians and vehicles, as the only source of information. Maybe we can look at our K-based data set as well and see, the number of complaints we're getting around trips and falls and within the network as well. That might be an added statistic we could bring to the reports. Yeah.
Right, thank you. The final question that I had was actually just following on from Councillor Dingwall's questions, and the response I think I heard from the officers around sort of optionality around a more comprehensive treatment there in Wood Street, and didn't know if exactly where that now sits with you and whether you would need direction from a committee to revisit that, or where that sits.
I suppose we look at each project site and try to determine what we think is the appropriate solution to improve the safety. There are always options to do more. So I think what we're hearing is that, there's maybe some community interest in, why isn't there a pedestrian crossing? One of the options is we're proposing a threshold. There might be a way of making that threshold more visible to traffic in a way. So I think that's what Chris is talking about, whether we can, put in place some markings or some other, other devices which highlight the fact that there is a crossing point. So as a way of enhancing that solution. Yeah. So I will do that anyway. I mean, I don't think there's any need for a direction on that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Petrinas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your report. I have two questions. The first one is I'm wanting to understand, when is action going to occur on the traffic safety issues in Dogwood Way?
I think, well, I can't remember when the council we came into council about that, but we have installed the passing bay with the parking signs. So those have gone in, and we are now looking at potentially adding to that further down towards Clearview Drive, as well as some other restrictions around the court bowl due to other rising concerns.
Yes, I just sort of would add that the actual problems has increased now that there is parking occurring in the cul-de-sac head, and so motorists are having difficulty sort of circulating through there. The second question I have is, it's great to see the actual work undertaken at the Roberts Line Railway Road intersection, especially on the southern part of Roberts Line with the rumble strips and the marking. Is there any intention to have a speed reduction on Railway Road in the vicinity of the intersection?
At the moment, we have a temporary speed limit operating at 50, I believe. But under stage 1 of the speed limit bylaw review, we are proposing to reduce the speed on all approaches. So Roberts Line goes from 100 down to 80. I believe north of Railway Road, north of the intersection, is going down to 80, and then between pretty much the airport through to Roberts Line down to 60.
Given that this issue occurred over nearly 2 weeks ago, how come it's taking so long to at least put temporary speed restriction signs up?
The GM would like to just respond.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we responded within 3 days, and I think we've responded really, really well, and well done to the officers.
Thank you. But there's no temporary speed restriction sign on Railway Road?
There were some when the works were occurring, and our contractors removed them when we asked them to leave them up. So they are working on putting them back up if they have been taken away.
Okay. Yep. In hand. No further questions? 2 final questions. The Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Naylor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Robert and Chris. Comfortable with the timing of the report, given it stemmed from the pedestrian facilities audit, which used to be quarterly. Can you tell me whether the annual audit of pedestrian facilities in the city, which was due in March, has been undertaken?
No, we haven't done that. That's certainly not. That's not on our radar. No, that's missed my calendar. So I'll have to reinstate that. So.
Because what I was expecting to see in this report was some analysis of that audit, and I've had a look back at the planning and strategy work schedule, and so I guess my concern perhaps is that we've gone from quarterly to nothing in the last 12 months.
Yeah, no, it's fair to say that we've lost some momentum on some of these auditing processes through COVID, and there's been a lot of other preoccupations for the team. But no, we'll make sure we get those back on schedule. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll put that onto the work schedule. Thank you, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Under 3.2.6, it's got George Street Pedestrian Trail as one of the projects planned for this year, and I'm just wanting to understand what that trial is.
So that trial is under the NZTA's Innovating Streets program, where we've received 90% subsidy for certain projects. So the trial is looking at, I guess, testing a potential road closure of George Street between Main Street and Common Mall on a, I think we're planning on a series of Sundays to pedestrianise the street and allow the businesses to spill out into the area. So there'll be a bit of monitoring on that and seeing how that goes, and we'll gather information, and it kind of feeds information back to us, or whether we think there can be a long-term project involved in that, or long-term solution, I mean.
Thank you. So it's just closed on Sundays and then it changes back for the week. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, it's a very temporary trial just to see how the people react and whether it is a successful thing to consider as a future permanent idea.
Okay, so can I just follow up? So will there be some communication that goes out to people to let them know, and to the shop owners in that street?
Absolutely. We'll be, I guess, the part of the project or requirements from NZTA is that we engage with the public on the ideas and get feedback before we implement it and consider how it's all done. We'd want to, I guess, publicly make it, advertise it to get the most out of it as well, and to monitor the reactions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry, one final member, Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just following up on the George Street. So you're only looking at a trial on a Sunday?
That was our intention, but there's possible, we could consider the scope of what we do. That's what we initially proposed to NZTA.
Do you not feel that just closing on Sunday, I'm just in general terms, people drive a bit different on Sunday than what they do on Monday?
I guess Sunday is probably the busier retail, because there's a lot of cafes and restaurants along that strip. I think Sundays is probably one of their busiest trade days, and which makes sense to do it for them.
Okay.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. No further questions. I'm happy to move both recommendations that are in the report, seconded by Councillor Johnson, and open it up for any comment or debate. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment regarding the Roberts Line Railway Road situation that was alluded to by Councillor Petrinas, and that is that I personally was very impressed with the rapid and efficient response of officers, and particularly in receiving an extremely lengthy email with outlines of short-term, medium-term and long-term changes that would be made to that intersection on the 21st of August. And that, I think, gave elected members confidence that staff were across the issue and that a really rapid response was being actioned. So I think that needs to be applauded, and I certainly had a lot of confidence when I got that email, and so I think it's important that we state that publicly. Just in general about road safety, I mean, it is a concern, and this was my line of questioning, that despite significant efforts, we're not apparently making much inroad into the crash statistics, and in fact, even in some places they're increasing. And I do think, as the officer said, this isn't just us, this is a nationwide issue, but nevertheless, it would be useful for us to try and be looking at perhaps things that have worked in other places, to compare our network to other cities that perhaps are having better results, and to be open to change, because I think unless we start making some significant changes, we're probably going to continue to see these concerning stats. So just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yeah, good to see this report and its alignment to the sort of more natural rhythms, to bring it into this spot in the annual diary. Would join other councillors in acknowledging the officers for their rapid response around the Roberts Line Railway Road tragedy and the sort of response subsequent to that. But you know, we are faced with the unpleasant reality here that you know, the road safety stats are generally either moving in the wrong direction or stubbornly stable, and we need to think about how we're actually going to, you know, effectively respond as a council to that over time. And a couple of things that are in my mind to that regard are around recognizing that road safety is more than an engineering exercise. There absolutely is an infrastructure and engineering component to it, but it is very much a multi-agency response that's actually needed if we're going to be effective in that space, and that includes Horizons with their road safety activities, and certainly the police as well. And I'd like to see the reporting move to a multi-agency lens so that we could see what's happening in the big picture around road safety in our community and understand where we might want to either give feedback to other agencies or increase emphasis on our own activities. The pedestrian stats are particularly concerning to see that spike there, and I think we need to be quite conscious about making sure that we're matching the response to the cause, and I struggle with that area in particular. And some of you will remember when this report was here a few months ago, I made some comment to that, and that was the genesis of the recommendation in the transport portfolio report to planning and strategy recently around a pedestrian network improvement plan, that I think we actually need to step up where we are in the pedestrian space and have a proper forward vision there around how we're going to better support pedestrian activity in the city beyond just fixing the footpath faults. And hopefully that might pick up some of the deputy mayor's concerns around the monitoring sort of dropping into a black hole occasionally if we actually had a proper forward-looking network improvement plan around the pedestrian side of the transport network. And obviously road safety would need to feature substantially in that. So a couple of the general comments in terms of the future in this space was also wanted to acknowledge and thank the officers for revisiting the options around Wood Street, sort of perhaps on the fly, you could say, during the meeting here. But I think, we do need to be very, very conscious when we are thinking about what solutions go in what places, that we're actually sympathetic to and well aware of the needs and expectations in those neighborhoods and those communities, and doing our best to match that. And in these sort of cases, I would hope that we could be installing infrastructure that, should further intervention be needed, such as an upgrade from a refuge with a few lines to a proper crossing, that it wouldn't require ripping everything out that we've put in, just so that we could then make that next upgrade, but that we could put in infrastructure that, if it needs subsequent upgrades to zebra crossings or other ways of supporting pedestrian safety in those places, that it can sort of be built up incrementally without having to rebuild and rebuild. So I'll leave it there, and thank you again to the officers for bringing us the report.
Thank you. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank the officers for the report. Not something I'd want to be dealing with too much, but I just sort of think, when I look at the stats here, that pedestrians and cyclists especially, the increase in fatals, or serious mainly, that maybe we've got it wrong, and maybe we need to get back around the drawing board and redo the whole planning on what we're doing with cyclists, what we're doing with pedestrians, because just picking away at bits and pieces, as we can see by the stats, we're not really dealing with anything. It's just continuing along or increasing. The second point I'd like to make is on the close of George Street. I feel if you're going to do a trial, you need to do a trial over a week or two, not a day. I just don't think a Sunday's. And my comment to the officer around people who drive a bit differently on a Sunday. If you're cruising into town for a meal on George Street on Sunday, you're prepared to park and take a walk and enjoy your time. Those on Monday and so forth are travelling a bit quicker and want to get to where they're going, A to B stuff. Let's put the trial over a proper period of time where we can judge it correctly.
Okay, no further speakers, so therefore I'd invite you to vote. Councillor Butt?
Yes.
Councillor Hancock?
For.
That is passed unanimously. I'll now going to adjourn this meeting just for a short morning break before we take the last items, and we'll reconvene at 11 o'clock. Thank you. hear us now? Checking 1, 2. Better now.
Yeah.
Did you want to comment, Councillor Butt, or were you just indicating you couldn't hear us?
Yeah, I couldn't hear a thing when, from the start.
Okay. We've, in fairness then, that we've just put on the item for the report that come up in comments around the pedestrians audit, and that's scheduled for November, but otherwise there's no other changes to the work schedule.
Okay.
And I'm going to call for a vote. It's been moved and seconded, and Councillor Hancock, did you have a comment?
Yeah, we actually didn't hear anything of the last two items.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'll leave it with you.
Okay. That's unfortunate. We have moved and seconded and voted on item 9. Item 10, now you do have a chance to confirm. I had called for the vote and you did both vote for item 9. Item.
Didn't vote for that.
Okay. No. Let's vote on the work schedule this time. We can vote at Councillor Butt to receive the work schedule.
Yes.
Councillor Hancock.
For.
Thank you. Must be some members still to vote. That is passed unanimously. Just before we conclude, we do need to receive the minutes of the Part 2 Infrastructure Committee. I had intended to move that right at the beginning with the Part 1 minutes, but I'll move the Part 2 minutes be received. Seconded the Mayor. Any comments? All those in favour say aye. Oh, sorry, we're going to do this on the vote. Mixing two. And Councillor Butt.
Yes.
Councillor Hancock.
For.
Thank you. That is passed unanimously. And also understanding that it's Tom's last meeting in support of our Infrastructure Committee meeting, there will be other opportunities to acknowledge his contribution to the city, particularly for this meeting around infrastructure and the merger of the two units and the whole step change in focus and energy that's been infused into the unit has been incredible, and the transparency and honesty of the state of our assets and what's required is fantastic work, and no doubt we'll be bearing the fruits of it from the next annual plan onwards into the future. So quite a significant contribution, and thank you for your support for me as chair and for this committee infrastructure, and no doubt we'll have other opportunities to acknowledge you appropriately. But thank you. I'll now close the meeting, and whatever time is recorded if you needed it. Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillors, we'll go straight into our first workshop, and I'd like to, we'll do the mountain bike club Kutuara Road workshop, and you've all received papers on that. There's been a workshop background information